First major natural disaster and a test of his young administration.
Ellison Barber is live for us in Washington, D.C. with more on how the White House is now responding to this. Ellison, good morning.
Good morning to all of you. Hurricane Harvey is considered a stress test of sorts for this administration. It's potentially the first major test of how they'll respond to a natural disaster. One Republican already warning President Trump, telling him not to make the same mistake President George W. Bush made with Hurricane Katrina. The president is at Camp David this weekend. His team says he's closely watching the hurricane. Yesterday, he signed a disaster declaration providing federal aid to Texas before the brunt of the storm even hit the state. President Trump tweeting at Texas Governor Greg Abbott that his administration will remain, quote, fully engaged with open lines of communication as Hurricane Harvey makes landfall, adding, quote, America is with you. He also posted a photo from the Oval Office. The White House says it shows the president receiving a briefing from FEMA Administrator Brock Long, Chief of Staff John Kelly, and counterterrorism advisor Tom Bossert. Bossert says the president is staying in touch with everyone in that room and directly speaking with state officials.
The president's worried about the 4.6 million people or so that are in that area of Texas that are going to be affected by this, because to them, this is the most important thing they're going to have to worry about for the next 24, 48, 72 or more hours. I was extremely happy with his leadership instincts on this, and I think that will carry through as you see him respond to this event.
The White House says President Trump is planning to visit Texas, and he could do that as early as next week. Abby, Todd, Clayton.
Ellison Barber live for us in Washington. Ellison, thank you.
Thanks so much.
So how will the Trump administration handle the first big test of its emergency response?
Let's bring in former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Good to see you, sir. And I think the big question, the big point I want to pull out from the research that you gave us on this, don't think federal government is going to bail you out. Explain that.
No, don't think the feds are going to come running and save you. I mean, they're going to do everything they can, and it does appear as if President Trump is way ahead of this, much more than President Obama was last year. You would think after Katrina we had learned a lot of these lessons, but not so, because August of last year, massive flooding in a no-name storm in Baton Rouge, 146,000 people in their homes damaged, tens of thousands of people displaced. FEMA did a good job initially getting water out there, but housing was a massive problem. It was an absolute disaster. They got more than 30 inches of rain, and yet FEMA was absolutely pathetic. We had several hearings on this in the House, and I worry that they haven't learned these lessons.
And you've seen this at the local level. I mean, we were talking about this.
Yes.
Jason and I go way back. I mean, you've been congressman for a number of years, but you were also the chief of staff when my dad was governor of Utah.
Yeah.
You guys dealt with a number of things, including a mine collapse, when he first got in office, flooding. So you've seen how important it is at the local level to help the people out and to coordinate with the executive branch.
I was a newly minted chief of staff to your dad, the 16th governor of Utah. It was literally 5 days into his administration down in St. George, Utah, massive flooding, loss of homes. Probably the most important thing that he did is he actually got down there, got feet on the ground, because you can actually move and push resources. At the end of the day, it's going to be your local community. You know, this is the thing that's inspiring to me, is you're going to have ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. It's going to be your local church group. It's going to be your local affiliates. It's going to be your mayor who's really going to make the biggest difference, because it affects literally millions of people.
Right,
what did you learn out of those hearings, though? You talk about the bureaucracy, right? Is that the problem here, trying to move these resources, getting the relationships between the state and local officials and the federal government? What did you learn in those hearings?
Total lack of communication from FEMA. You got a lot of desk jockeys in Washington, D.C., but when you actually talk to the local mayors where there's maybe 1,000 people in town, that's where the real problem is. And there's a lot of attention on this, but when we get to midweek and the storm starts, because the levees broke, the water starts to get rancid, livestock is dying, and so they don't have electricity. They don't have a way to communicate. Shut-ins are running out of medication. That's when the death toll starts to go up. And that's what you really got to worry about. And that's what FEMA, you would think, would learn these lessons, but that's where they have fallen down.
I mean, you talk about President Trump, and this is really the first big test he has of a natural disaster being in office. How important is it to have the right people around you? You think about General John Kelly, who is now chief of staff in the White House, who ran DHS, who's been on the front lines of a number of different crises overseas in war. How helpful will those voices be for the president to help navigate the situation?
The one thing I think Donald Trump has done exceptionally well as the president is he's surrounded people with a military mindset. And they don't take no for an answer. They know how to move resources. Now, they have a new FEMA director. He's only been approved. It was confirmed by the Senate about 2 months ago. So you got a fairly new, fresh face there heading up FEMA. But again, you also have a Governor Abbott who is very seasoned in this. Texas knows how to take care of itself. Right. You had a fairly pathetic governor, in my opinion, in Louisiana, Governor Edwards, who didn't even know how many people were affected 6 months after the disaster down there. So between Governor Abbott, I think the president, he does have a good military mindset around him. Texas is pretty tough, too.
Jason, in your opinion, when should President Trump visit the affected area?
Well, you got to be careful because everybody's going to try to move heaven and earth. The president's coming. He announced he's going to go, but you got to let it subside a little bit. I think it's most important that he's on the phone with the governor. Let the governor ask for resources. Where do things need to be mobilized? They got 700 National Guard down there. It's probably going to take more than that if you've got that many millions of people. But again, it's going to be your first responders. It's going to be that person who's a plumber, who's just working, 20 hours a day helping his neighbor. Those are the people that are probably going to make the best difference. Those are going to be the inspirational stories.
You're so right, the local community. And let's just hope this doesn't turn political anytime soon, as it often does. Jason, always good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, coming up here on the show, we're following some other big news this morning from Washington. President Trump pardoning former Sheriff Joe Arpaio. We're going to hear from him next. Plus, how is Texas preparing to respond to Hurricane Harvey as the sun gets ready to rise? We're about 25 minutes away from sunrise.
34 minutes after the hour now in a Fox News alert. Police out in the middle of Hurricane Harvey, risking their lives, making sure people are safe. Right now, you are looking at video from Rockport, Texas. This is the Fairfield Inn in that area. You're looking at, I believe that is an outside photo. Now we're going to switch it to an inside photo. You can see the damage. Take a look at that.
Yeah, this was the hardest hit area right as that eye wall hit this area early. We tried to get reporters into that area and they couldn't get in there because there's cell towers down. No communication.
You can see
all
the
along
dripping.
the hallway. As you said, though, Clayton, we had Rob Schmidt, our reporter, who was down there trying to get to us from Rockport. There was zero cell service. People hopefully have evacuated that area, but you had people, I guess, from nursing homes who had evacuated, people going to jails to find shelter. We're just now getting that visual in the, as we're waking up this morning.
Oh, look at that drop ceiling there, and it just goes to show you the sheer devastation, especially if water's sitting on some of those flattened commercial buildings there. They don't have the runoff that you would have on residential buildings, and so some of those drop ceilings, tiles just collapsed right there, right out of the ceiling. Rick Reichmuth is standing by right now. We're seeing, downgraded, Rick, to a Category 1, but frankly, who cares when you're seeing all of the rain and how much and how long the storm is going to hang out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Who cares? The storm is always going to weaken once it's over land. It doesn't have its moisture source anymore. I will tell you, I think we will see this weaken less in a sense because it is not going to get very far off of the land or off of the water. And so it's going to continue to be able to pull some of this Gulf moisture in over the next couple of days. That's why we expect to see these rainfall totals so high. A lot of the models that we're looking at, we have a thing called precipitable water, which is how much water's in the atmosphere. We are seeing records with this, numbers that we've never seen before as far as how much water's in the atmosphere. All that water up is going to go down and fall. Storm came on shore, and to the north of this, we have a hurricane watch in effect until 1 o'clock. We're going to continue to see that throughout the day today, tomorrow. The next number of days, there will be a tornado threat because of the rotation in the atmosphere. Small tornadoes, not large tornadoes, but small tornadoes can pop up far away from where the center of the storm is. So you certainly need to watch this. Take a look over here, guys. This is 48 hours of this storm evolving. This year, we have a new satellite that's giving us imagery. It's called GO-16. It was launched last year, became operational this year. So it's the first time we're seeing it and the first hurricane that we're seeing it with. And what a spectacular visual sight of this. Obviously, a devastating storm, but you get a 48-hour sense of this. And unfortunately, it got its act together right at landfall. A landfalling hurricane that is strengthening is much more dangerous than a landfalling hurricane that is stable. That there is an ability for the winds that are higher in the atmosphere to transport down to the ground, which is where we are and what causes the damage. And because of that, once we see the images, I think it's going to be very bad. But strengthening right up to landfall. In fact, no sign after it made landfall that it weakened for about an hour or so. That's certainly bad news. But visually a beautiful sight. It's going to run into this high pressure that's out here across parts of the southwest, and that is going to nudge it back and keep it in the same spot. And the latest model runs that we're looking, you've heard us talk forever about this kind of cone of uncertainty, as people call it. Well, here you go. It's a big blob because we can't say exactly where it's going to go. But if you look at the center line of it, which normally we say don't look at the center line of it, if you do, take a look at this. That one is where we are today. Go into tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. We're all right in the same spot. In fact, we might see a second landfall that move back over water, make a second landfall in the same spot, maybe by Wednesday. Some uncertainty in that, obviously, but the point is the indications are that the storm stays in the same spot, all that moisture in the air falling to the ground. So, Clayton, even though you say down to a Category 1,
right,
that just means those winds are weakening, but that wind field also expands in order to do that. So the strong winds are going to expand out from where that center of it is. So places that we're seeing maybe 30 miles an hour winds are probably going to see 50-mile-an-hour winds on top of the rain. That will cause problems far away from the center of the storm.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, let's bring in Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Mr. Paxton, thanks for being here. And let's start off with the question a lot of people are wondering. In these types of storms, you always have the best in humanity, people coming out to help their fellow man. You also have oftentimes the worst, people price gouging, things along those lines. What are you doing to try and prevent that? And if you can't prevent it, bring those to justice who are doing such horrible things in a time of emergency?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I'd encourage your viewers to pray for our people. You know, obviously there are going to be people that stayed behind. We don't know how many. That's our first concern. But you're right. That's something we're out looking for. I've got people out looking for price gouging. We've already found one big retailer that was charging $42 for a case of water, another gas station, $99 for a case of water. So I just want people to know we're out looking for those, and we're finding them because we have plenty of people out there who are taking pictures and letting us know. So we'll be dealing with those people as we find them.
So also repairs, and this time, obviously, this is a big issue. So one thing that you want to make people aware of is repairs, building repairs, contractors who say they're going to do something, prey on individuals. You put up money, give them cash, and then what happens?
Well, same thing. We have people that, you know, email us, they take pictures, they let us know, and so we pursue those people. We have strong civil penalties up to $20,000 per violation. If you gouge somebody that's over 65, the cost is up to $250,000. So there's some severe penalties, and believe me, we're looking for them, and we'll be coming after them.
So this storm obviously hit at the dead of night as the sun is about to come up there in Texas. It's been hard for us as newscasters to get a sense of just how bad the damage has been because there hasn't been cell access to a lot of these places. What have you been told? What do you expect when that sun does come up and we have a much better sense of what we're looking at and the damage that was really done?
So what I know, I have some people on the ground in Corpus. Just talked to one of my guys out there. He said obviously even difficult for them to see, but he has seen many ambulances headed out early in the morning. So we know that they're out there. They've been staging all over the area. So as the sun comes up, just like you, we'll be seeing more. But I do know that they've had first responders out early this morning.
We just got a tweet in, the president up this morning from Camp David, tweeting in response to Senator Chuck Grassley, who told the president to stay focused and respond to this and not make a Hurricane Katrina mistake like George W. Bush did. Here's what the president says. Got your message loud and clear. We have fantastic people on the ground. Got there long before Harvey. So far, so good. Is that the response that you're experiencing at the local level there, Mr. Paxton?
Oh, absolutely. The president has been on this from early stages, working with our governor, working with our people. So, you know, he was here early, and I think he's very focused on that. We've talked to the governor, and I think he's pretty pleased with the response. They've already declared many counties disaster areas, and I think we're on top of this as well as we can be, and I think the president has been too.
What does that mean for our viewers that don't understand? What does that mean to have something declared a disaster area?
It means that federal money can flow immediately, and so, you know, there's going to be lots of damage and lots of things that need to be resolved, and rather than taking months and months and potentially years, you speed the process up. So getting that money flowing early really makes a significant difference in the lives of people who are affected by this storm.
Yeah, well, the storm certainly is not over yet. It sounds like what's so troubling about this, Mr. Paxton, is that it could last for another 4 to 5 days along the coast. We've been talking to reporters there on the ground in Houston, Texas, saying that even an inch of rain there can cause flooding. They're expecting maybe up to 20 inches of rain. How prepared is Texas for that?
Well, I've lived here, decades. I've never seen anything like this. I don't know if you can ever be